In 2017, Australia had a plebiscite regarding gay marriage. We wasted over $520 million to answer a question we already knew the answer to. It was a really interesting time in our history, and it was a really interesting moment of pushing, civil rights forward. It's not interesting enough for me to make a video on it, but it is interesting enough to be used as a mechanism and a comparison point for what we're actually going to be talking about today. Now, Labor and the Liberals didn't always support gay marriage. Back in 2010, Labor was still fiercely against gay marriage. And there was a openly gay senator by the name of Penny Wong who defended the Labor Party. On that, she said, on the issue of marriage, I think the reality is there is a cultural, religious, historical view around that which we have to respect. In my opinion, she was justifying or defending the Labor Party's position that gay or lesbian men and women were not entitled to marry their loved ones like everyone else. But interestingly, Penny Wong was also one of the most influential figures in ensuring that Australians who are gay got the right to marry one another. And I think it opens up a very interesting question about what someone should or could be willing to do in the short term, even if it goes against their values, if it means in the long run, you're able to help the most amount of people or do things that ultimately align or connect with your values. Penny Wong seems to have made a decision that it was better to stand by her party and in the short term, go against her beliefs or values because she knew in the long run it would lead to the most amount of change. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Well, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is bracing for the defection of the government's youngest senator. Afghan-born Fatima Payman is expected to formally split from Labor later this week in a protest over recognition of Palestine, her mother calling her a hero.
There's some quite extraordinary protest activity that's gone on for about the last 15 minutes. We're here in the forecourt of Parliament House. I want to show you about 15 metres high on the tall marble pillars at the front of Parliament House. I've counted 4 protesters who've somehow managed to climb to the top. You can hear the chanting and see some of the banners that have been hung from the very front of Parliament House.
Now I, like I'm assuming almost every single one of you watching this video, had absolutely no idea who Fatima Payman was until all of this happened. I think that's a fine thing. I don't think every member of parliament needs to be this big forward-facing individual. Represent your constituents, do a good job, go home. I'm not from Western Australia. It's usually bad when you know the names of senators or parliamentarians not in your state. She's one of the youngest women in parliament, I believe, and I believe she's also the first parliamentarian who wears a hijab. That's a fun fact. I'm sure, like many of us, no one gives a shit, except if you are part of the One Nation Party, and I can imagine you were clawing out your ears when you hear that information. She wasn't voted in by name, she was voted in by party when they went above the line. I think Labor had 511,000 votes, but when it came to people actually putting her as a preference, I want to say she had about 1,600. It's very reminiscent of the Lydia Thorpe situation, where when she went against the Greens, people thought it was wrong that the Greens were losing a seat when she got voted in based on the party rather than the person. Nevertheless, she's just an everyday parliamentarian. Why is she in the news so much at the moment? She broke the unbreakable, she did the unforgivable curse type vibe in the eyes of Labor, and she crossed the floor on the issue of Palestine. The Greens put forward a motion and they wanted to recognize a Palestinian state. And Labor kind of came with a cheeky amendment and said, whoa, okay, hey, we all agree with this, okay? We all want to recognize a state, but maybe let's tweak the wording a little bit, right? Give it a little tweak here or there, and that we want to recognize it in the context of an ongoing peace process in the name of a two-state solution. It's a bit of a difficult time to recognize the state of Palestine when you've got Abbas ruling over the West Bank and you've got Hamas ruling over the Gaza Strip. Makes things a little bit complicated, I understand that. But the Greens voted it down and said, nah, we're not doing it. And Fatima went on their side of the aisle and voted against Labor. Now, it didn't matter because the motion didn't go through. The Greens didn't get it passed through the Parliament. And then a little bit awkwardly, Labor put through their own bill through the House with their amendment built in, and that did pass. And the people who disagreed with that were the Liberals, the Greens, Katter, and I think Allegra Spender as well, if I'm remembering off the top of my head. It makes you wonder, if she'd waited to cross the floor a little bit longer, would you have ended up getting the state you wanted, just under different circumstances? And would it have been better to work within the party to eventually change that wording or to really push for the recognition rather than sandbag. She did nothing but get herself suspended from the caucus, and we'll talk about that now. So the caucus is made up of all the Labour members. It's typically divided up in, your Labour left, Labour right, Labour centre. Not that any of those groups actually mean anything in the modern day. And they get to vote on things like the leader of the party, the policies they're going to be putting forward, and that's where they can debate or disagree on ideas. But one of the core tenets of the Labour caucus is caucus solidarity. No matter what, if you're voted down within the caucus, when it comes to actually voting on a bill or amendment or legislation, you are in line with the party. She says that she was kicked out. She was almost like bullied out or made to feel like she wasn't welcome and that there was no chance of rejoining the Labour Party. Not that she was kicked out. When I say rejoining, I mean rejoining the caucus. But some statements from senior Labour officials or people within the party disagree with that. That the reason she was indefinitely suspended is because she said she would do it again. She would cross the floor again. That even when informed that she needed to follow caucus solidarity, she refused to do it and said, I'm not going to be part of that process. I'm going to do what my conscience tells me. And said something about voting in line with God, which I'm a big believer in separating church and state. So it doesn't matter if you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, the spaghetti one. That's a worrying statement for me, personally, but, we'll put that to the side. But she was indefinitely suspended from there because she felt like she wasn't welcome. I believe Katie Gallagher made some statements that she tried to get in contact with her and other members of the Labour Party, tried to, keep that bridge not crumbling down, and so the connection is still there. It seems to be unsalvageable. For that, she's now left to become an independent. It seems to be that as this story is unfolding, that she was already in talks with political experts about what it would mean for her to become an independent senator, that she had been thinking about that decision to cross the floor or go against the party for a long time now. And some Labour officials are saying that that means she's being dishonest or disingenuous when she makes the claim that she didn't know what her vote was going to be until that amendment or that bill was actually put forward in the voting session. However, I don't think that's entirely fair. I think the issue of Israel and Palestine has been happening for months now in the mainstream political discourse, but she was probably aware of this issue for years, if not decades. It seems to be a close to the heart issue. It makes sense to me that when the Labour Party wasn't particularly keen on recognizing a Palestinian state in the current circumstance, that she had that moment or that question of, what's it going to mean for my political future? And she reached out to some experts to find out what her choices would be. I think it's simultaneously possible that she did get that expert and additional opinion, whilst also not knowing what a decision was going to be until that vote actually happened in front of her eyes. So I think that's a little bit disingenuous from the Labour Party. With that said, overall, was it the right choice to make? And were there some other motivations behind it? I think that's more of the interesting point of contention we're going to get into. So motivation is pretty important. Why do people do what they do? And we have some conflicting motivations. Fatima will claim that she just wants to help the Palestinian people, that she doesn't think it's right, that their state is not being recognized, and that the way to move forward is recognition, that you can't have peace without Israel or other surrounding countries, or just countries across the world, recognizing the Palestinian people and their right to a state and sovereignty. That's a pretty big and clear and easy motivation. However, it also came out recently that Fatima had made some donations. They had to be at least over $300 to be put in the public thing. I don't know what the name of that would be called. Registrar? Donations? Awareness? Whatever. It was over $300 to an organization that has made some pretty questionable content. They did some stuff about the Barbie movie being propaganda, and they also platform someone who has some really bad takes on homosexuality and the risks to homosexuality. They're going to be up there. You can take a squiz if you're interested. I will not be repeating them. They're pretty horrific. Now, this might be a guilty by association moment. I don't know if she donated before those views were public. I don't know if she donated for another reason. I don't know if it was like a family donation and she just wanted to be careful. I have no idea. I think it's worth mentioning. When I looked up her voting history, her public statements, I can't see anything that was outwardly anti-LGBT. I would assume that Labour did their due diligence when it came to pre-selection, but the way they are engaging with this woman now, I am not so sure about that, but that's worth keeping in mind. Another thing is Anthony Albanese is claiming that these concerns about Palestine weren't brought up during caucus meetings, or they weren't brought up effectively. Fatima said in one interview that she felt like she exhausted all avenues, and to that I say, how? That is almost impossible. You have been in the parliament, I want to say less than 2 years at the time I'm making this video. There is no universe that all avenues have been exhausted. This seems like someone who had a real passion or drive for this issue, and rather than acting with thoughts about the long term, has short term gone, what do I need to do to make my conscience feel good or bolster support? And it's just kind of impulsively, or not even impulsively, because that's not even fair, because she sought expert advice, had just acted in a way that's gone, no, I need this done now. Similar to the way a child can't stop eating a marshmallow, even if they're told that if they don't eat it for 30 minutes, then they'll get 2 marshmallows in the future. Because again, she bombed her political career, at least within Labour, it seems. And the amendment went through anyway. So again, it did not matter. And the timeline is really important. And I don't know if we'll ever have the full amount of information for this story, but it's really necessary to know if she brought it up prior or she kind of kept her mouth shut and then just did this so it would become a big public spectacle. I think there can be a lot of value in doing a big public moment. Look, for a lot of you who watch my content on TikTok, you'll know where I stand on this current conflict in the Middle East, but I think what those people did at Parliament was pretty cool, you know? You didn't damage anything, you didn't hurt anybody, you got your message out there. It's a pretty cool form of protest. I think that has value, even if I somewhat disagree with it. But what Fatima has done here is just achieve nothing and make it worse for everybody. If anything, in the long run, she's hurt the long-term goal of getting this immediate recognition of a Palestinian state, or this recognition of a Palestinian state before there is a two-state solution or some other peace solution in the Middle East, because now the Labour Party has really unified and rallied behind this amendment, and it looks worse for the Greens or other left-leaning parties who vote against the recognition of a Palestinian state within the context of a two-state solution and enduring peace. That's why I think someone like Penny Wong was so interesting and so effective, where she had the ability to go, man, this is against my conscience or against my values, but I know in the long run it's going to be the thing that ensures we get the best possible outcome. And she did get the best possible outcome. She got exactly what she wanted and exactly what was good for the most amount of people. Realistically, Fatima is going to be somewhat isolated now. And on the issue of Israel and Palestine, she has way less impact on putting forward policy or amendments or public statements that will actually do anything or reach the most amount of people as an independent. One of the benefits of being in a major party is you can build up support within the party, and through caucus meetings or internal votes or internal pressures, you can shift and change the position of a party. You know, there are some people, especially on the left, who think that that statement is some hippie liberal nothingness. But that's the truth of the matter. Incremental change is effective and it works. And Penny Wong was able to do that within the party. She picked her moment, she talked to the right people, and when the time was right, you know, there was that internal pressure and it worked. But that door is now closed for Fatima. There isn't the possibility to do that when there were members within Labour who were more empathetic or supportive of the Palestinian side. And now she doesn't have the same access to them that she used to, or she would have had. And it becomes that real question of why? Why do that if for no other reason than to stroke your ego or clear your conscience or be in line with your values because you can't handle what it would mean to temporarily put them to the side for what would eventually or possibly be the greater good. And for some people, that's a really disgusting perspective to have. There are a lot of young people, I think, when that article came out where Penny Wong did make a comment, or the article referenced Penny Wong's decision to not support gay marriage, young people thought that that was a disgusting action. And I understand that, but at the end of the day, you know, is it better to vindicate yourself in the short term if it means in the long term you don't get what you want, or to kind of keep your mouth shut, do something you're a little bit uncomfortable with or you don't necessarily think is right, or vote in line with the party, but then publicly make statements that do advocate and support your position if you know in the long term it's going to actually achieve things. You know, this hasn't helped anyone at all. Like, at all. Like, no one. No one benefited from this. I guess to close it off, because it's easy to criticize, but it's hard to come up with solutions, I think this was a moment where Fatima needed to seek professional support from colleagues or political experts that could help manage the internal turmoil, but it would have been better to vote in line with the party, and then within spaces where there was an opportunity for debate or dissenting opinion, or when she was able to speak publicly, she should have made it clear what eventually she'd like to see or what the direction of the party should be. Remember, Labour doesn't have a position where you can't have a dissenting opinion full stop. It's that when it comes to voting, there needs to be that caucus solidarity. And it seems as though this should have been a moment where you do the best possible thing you can in the moment, and then over time, you work on progressive change within the party. And I think it's unfair. I think truly empathize that it is unfair. If you were seeing these horrific images of, you know, men, women, or children being hurt, or you feel as though that the Australian government is aligning too much with a country that, you know, you believe is committing a horrible act like genocide or apartheid, it makes sense you don't want to be a part of that full stop and you want to rally against them. But I find it difficult to understand why someone who is clearly engaged enough in the political process to run for the Senate would also then not have the understanding or recognition that you can do greater and better work within a party, slowly tweaking it or adjusting it over time, than trying to do this big blowout moment that you knew you were going to get punished or condemned for. And I think she needed to learn from Penny Wong. I think it's what it really needed to be. I think Penny Wong is an incredibly effective politician, and while some people may say what she did was immoral or wrong, I think she got the best results that she could have possibly wanted over time, and I think Fatima needed to learn from that. But yeah, come let me know what you think in the comments. Come join the Discord. Come talk about it. Come say hi. I'm going to hope to do some more long-form content like this. If you got any recommendations or criticism or anything, let me know. But yeah, wish you all the best. We'll see how this affects the Labour Party in the next election. But hey, let's go.